how will solar panels improve my home's value? Now, Scott, I can tell you this. That's a great question. And it was such a great question that I didn't have the answer. And at the end of the day, when I don't have the answer, I have to reach out to my resources. And today I am reaching out to Andy Kim, who is the CEO of EVS Engineering, which is not a residential solar expert. Andy is actually a commercial solar expert. Andy has installed solar panels on his own home, and he has a couple other tricks up his sleeve that comes with solar. So Andy, thank you for coming on today. I'm really excited to have you on.
Hi Murph, how you doing?
Good. So Andy, give us a little insight. Give us your background first, because I think it's important that people understand your knowledge of solar. And again, I want to preface that you're not an expert when it comes to residential. You're more of an expert when it comes to solar and commercial. But give them a little background so they understand, we're talking to a guy that really understands solar today.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I've got a company, EVS. We are an engineering firm, and we design solar projects all over the country. So the projects we do are much larger scale. Sometimes these projects will be, 200-300 megawatts, which we're talking about, hundreds of acres of land being used. But we also do some commercial projects, which are rooftop. And so the whole reason why I have solar on my roof here at my house in Chanhassen is, well, I'm in the industry. I'm passionate about solar. I love technology, and financially it made a lot of sense. So it was a no-brainer, and so it was 2 years ago that I started the process, and then I got it up and running last year.
So Andy, one of the things I want to ask you is, obviously you have solar on your home. Did you put solar on your home just because you're an expert and obviously you know a lot more than the average person? Or did you get incentivized by the government and some of these incentives that are out there? And maybe you can enlighten us on some of these incentives, because I don't really know much about them, but I've heard about them.
Yeah. So the answer is both. So I wanted to do it because I wanted to learn about the process. I wanted to, firsthand, be able to open up the app that you get that lets you see all your production, right? All that data. I'm big into data, but also, as you mentioned, there was some really good incentives 2 years ago, and they still are actually in place. They just change kind of over time because solar actually gets cheaper year after year after year in terms of the cost to install. So the incentives kind of match, right? Because they don't need to provide as much incentive. But the big incentive is what they have 2 years ago was a 30% tax credit, meaning, my system was actually pretty expensive. I put a pretty big system on. It was almost $30,000, but then in my last tax return, I got a $10,000 credit back.
Wow.
So right there, a third of the system you get paid back in basically your first year. And then my payback period is about 7 to 8 years. And people say you should expect on average about a 7 to 10 year payback period. I plan on being in this home for the next 20 plus years, so it was a no-brainer. I think we'll talk about it a little later, but I also drive an electric vehicle. Hopefully we'll have a second electric vehicle for my wife within a year. So it makes a lot of sense, being a really high energy user, to have solar.
Well, and I had found, just to do a little research before we had this call today, a website. It's called solar-estimate.org. And I found some really good information about different incentives and different things that are being offered if you want to go solar. So we're going to add that in the comments below in our Facebook Live here. So if you guys want to check it out yourself, please feel free to do so. Andy, okay, let's talk a little bit about your system. So we have some pictures here of your house and the panels that are actually on your roof. Give us a little insight on what you have going on here, because like you said, you did a pretty expensive system. So what is the difference between maybe your system and maybe someone next door that's more of an average system? I mean, give us some insight on that.
Sure. So let's start with the aesthetics. I live in a neighborhood that has an HOA. And so the HOA has certain rules. And so one of the rules is you can't put solar panels on the lower tier. They want it to be on the upper tier. So that really limited where I could put my panels. And The other thing that I chose to do that was a little bit more expensive at the time was to do black panels to match closer with my black roof. Now, good news is these days, almost every panel out there is kind of going to this look. I think historically panels have had that more of that blue look, and frankly, once they're up on the roof, you really can't tell. But I really want to make sure it blended as much as it could. These photos don't really do it justice. It's very obvious when you look at it from up above, but when
Right.
you're driving on the street, you actually don't really even notice them. But to answer your question about why my system was maybe a little more expensive is normally you'd put them on the south or west facing slope of your roof. But you can see I've got it on all four sides. And I made the choice to do that mainly because there were really two reasons. One is I was limited with how much space I had. And because I'm a high energy user because of my electric vehicle, I wanted to generate as much solar as I could. But the south and west face is where you get the most sunlight, therefore the most production. But I chose to go put them on the north and east because I also wanted to experiment a little bit. I wanted to see, for the extra $2,000 or so that it cost me, was it worth it? And so I'm still kind of figuring that out right now because I've only had these panels for about a year and a half. So yeah.
Well, so there's another cool thing that you're doing. You're taking that energy that you're producing from your solar panel and you're powering your Tesla car. Is that right?
That's right. So I think it's pretty amazing to think that I'm driving off of energy that I produce here at my home. I just think it's pretty wild that
That is
you can.
cool.
So I think every car these days basically comes with a basic charger. So that's the charger that's supplied with the car. All I had to do was have an electrician come in and put in that special outlet. That's a 240 volt outlet, very standard to like what a dryer outlet would be, although it's a
Yep.
slightly different plug. Um, and basically, every day I come home, I choose to plug it in. I don't have to plug it in every day, but it's literally takes me 2 seconds. I hit a button, that little flap opens, stick it in, and I'm good to go the next day.
So fill us in a little bit more. Your solar panels, do they power your entire house? How much are they saving you on a regular basis based on what your bills were and what they are? Are you getting credits from whether it's Xcel Energy or whomever because maybe you're bringing power back to the grid? Give us a little bit more insight on some of the pluses and minuses and the different things that you can do with solar.
Yep. So it's called net metering, and what that means is Excel is watching how much power I produce versus how much they give me, right? And it's basically if I produce a kilowatt hour, they give me credit for that. And and so at the end of the month, they kind of balance it all out. If I produce more than I consume, I get a credit on my bill. So in the peak of summer, when my production is very high, even with running the air conditioner, I might get a check back for $10, or sometimes it might be as much as $50. And so that's part of the incentive, right? Is that they do this net metering, but then Excel, because I'm part of their what they call their solar rewards program, and it's a program you sign up for when you get your solar panels installed. On top of the net metering, they're giving me 7 cents per kilowatt hour for every kilowatt hour produced, and that comes in the form for me a check every year, and it's paid. They do that for 10 years. So after 10 years, I don't get that benefit, but I still get my net metering. So I think I got a check for roughly $1,000 last year, and that
Wow.
was for a partial year. So
Wow.
in the peak of summer, I might get a small credit on my bill, and then every year I get a nice check.
That's really cool. So with your solar panels, do they cover all your energy expenses?
So it varies, right? Because of my electric vehicle. If I'm driving a lot, no, I don't quite cover it because I don't actually have enough space on my roof to cover all of my needs. Um, so for a larger, if I had an ideal roof, I would have been able to cover all of it. But in my case, no, I fall short here and there. But with COVID,
Andy, what would you consider an ideal roof? Like, I mean,
mm,
is it a certain direction that your house faces, or what would be the
yeah,
ideal roof?
south facing, west facing, um, you know, the pitch is also important. I know I don't recall off the top of my head, um, but with with minimal obstructions. You don't want to have chimneys, roof stacks all
Right.
over the place.
Right. Okay, well, I want to talk a little bit more. I mean, that's pretty fascinating. That's really cool. It's actually getting me to think about a solar roof and just the different benefits of it, and obviously the tax credits, and it's pretty cool. But one of the things I was digging into, because again, I'll admittedly tell you, I don't pay a lot of attention to solar because it's just not in my wheelhouse. So I went and did a little bit more digging on the Tesla website, and I found their solar roof. And I'm guessing since you own a Tesla car, you probably know about the Tesla solar roof, which is literally panels that Tesla has put together where instead of having shingles on your roof, you have solar panels, and it almost looks like a real roof. Have you checked this out?
I did, and I wish I could have done it, but at the time, for some reason, our area was not part of that program. I think that's changed now. It is slightly more expensive, but from an aesthetic view, it looks incredible, and it's quite durable, right? I mean, I think they're supposed to last for 25 years.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know what a standard roof lasts, but probably not that long, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's pretty cool what Tesla is doing with that roof. So again, we're going to add that link, tesla.com and /solar roof. So we're going to put that into the comments too on this Facebook Live, because you should check it out. It's pretty cool. It's cool where things are going. And Andy, I mean, do you think, it's kind of like buying TVs, right? When a TV comes out, it's, kind of ridiculously expensive. It could be 3,000, 5,000, depending on what it is. If you're going to that 90-inch TV, but then all of a sudden, nowadays you want, like, let's call it a 40-inch TV, and it's a couple $100. Do you think solar is going to be that cheap going down the road, where it's going to almost come to the point where installing it is a no-brainer because of the benefits that you get and potentially the credits? Do you think that's where things are going to go?
Absolutely. I think if there's one takeaway that I'd like to share, it's that solar is changing the world. It's going to change how we produce and look at how we make power, in not just in our country but in the world. It's already dropped like 90% in the last 5 to 10 years. It just keeps dropping, right? And that's why I'm saying the incentives kind of match along with it. So that way, you could do it now, you won't regret it. You could wait a couple years, you probably won't regret it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's cool. Can you give us, I want to go now into your application where you're really knowledgeable, because I think it's just cool for people to understand it from maybe your perspective, which is the commercial perspective, with solar farms, and just, maybe give us just a little bit of a pep talk on what from your everyday business and how solar is changing the world from that perspective.
Yeah. Well, speaking at a macro level, 2019, solar was the fastest growing industry in our country, and for a reason. It is the cheapest way. It's probably the cheapest way to produce power these days. Once you get that system up and running, your maintenance costs, right, are minimal. Your actual fuel cost, if you think about it, is zero, right? It's coming from the sun. You don't have to burn anything, a natural resource to generate that power. And so everybody, even the oil and gas, the traditional oil and gas companies, are heavily investing in solar. These oil and gas companies are not oil and gas companies anymore. They're energy companies. It doesn't matter if it comes from oil and gas or solar or wind. And so just a huge shift towards solar, and what's coming up next would be batteries, solar and batteries combined.
Well, and I guess that leads me back to my buddy's question. And he had this company, which again, we're going to throw that in the comments here, because I hadn't heard about this company. It's called Everlight Solar, and they're in Minnesota. There's a link that we'll put in the comments. But my buddy Scott, he reached out to me, said, "Hey man, this might be a good one for your Facebook Live, but I have this company that's walking my neighborhood and has talked to a couple of my other neighbors. I wasn't home, but my other neighbors are going to move forward with this solar and put it on their house. Am I missing out, number one? And number two, his question is how does it affect the value of my house?" Now, as the real estate expert who helps people buy and sell houses on a regular basis, how does it affect the value of your house? I would tell you this. I've never sold a house, and I've sold a lot of houses, and I've never sold a single house that has had solar on it. Mm-hmm. So for me to give anybody input on how I perceive the value of a home to be affected by having solar or not having solar, there's just not enough data out there as far as transactions to give anybody any good information in regards to, if just like Andy's house, like if Andy called me and said, well, Tim, hey, come over and sell my house. By the way, I have a $30,000 solar system on my house. I want $30,000 or maybe even $50,000 more for my house. I would tell you what I would tell Andy is this. Andy, I doubt you're going to get $30,000 or $50,000 more for your house. Your house might be more saleable, but on the flip side, it's kind of like a pool. And again, this is my opinion. I don't have really any data or any fact-based evidence to give a good answer to this question, but it's kind of like a pool. Like if it's the right person, a pool is worth a lot and they want that house and they might pay extra if they were in a bidding war because they really want this house with a pool. Same with solar. If somebody wants solar and they see the benefits of it and they see how it's going to be a cost savings, or they have a Tesla car and they can charge their Tesla car, then yes, they might pay more for the house. But I would tell you that most people aren't thinking like solar is something that I need to have on my home because it's not really on a lot of homes. So I would tell you that it's probably neutral as far as how much somebody's willing to pay for your house. They're probably not willing to pay that much more. Andy, I don't know. I mean, what's your thoughts just from a consumer perspective? Do you think I'm on the right path or?
Yeah. Yes, I think generally speaking, yeah. Where I think there's definitely going to need to be some education though, because unlike a pool, right, where a pool, the pro is that you've got a pool, but there's lots of downsides, right? Insurance cost and maintenance cost. But with solar, generally you're whoever installed it, that warranty of that system stays with the home and the system. So if something happens and I move into a house and it's got solar, I don't need to worry about it. It's going to be covered under the warranty, and those panels are warranted for 25 years. Oh. Some of the other electronics are anywhere from 10 to 20 years, depending on what the original person put in. But here's the thing. That person is going to get the full benefit of the cost savings of the power, right? So unlike a pool that doesn't generate any revenue for you, this solar system will. The one thing I don't know that would be really good to look into is that solar reward program, that 7-cent premium that I get from Excel. I'm going to think that's going to stay with the system and it transfers to the new owner. But it would be good to confirm that. But if that's the case, you can say to this homeowner, hey, by the way, this house that has a 10 kilowatt system, you're going to get an extra $1,000 to $2,000 per year. I mean, that's for the next 10 years, and then free power for the rest of your life. That's got to be worth something. Maybe not the full price of the system, but it's definitely worth something.
Well, and I think that you nailed it on the head. The more people understand solar, they understand the benefits, they understand the potential chance to have money come in and or save money. I think that, yes, it can bring a big benefit and people could end up paying more. But I just think it's so new, which is kind of weird to say that solar is so new because it's been around for, 10, 15, 20 years. But yet we're sitting here saying that it's so new. But I think it is because it's cheaper and cheaper to put on and install, and people are becoming a lot more aware of environmentals, of our weather, and everybody is just becoming a lot more aware of that. I think that solar will be on more and more homes moving forward. So I think it will give us more data to give Scott a better answer of, yeah, Scott, you know what? This is how solar affects the saleability of a house. But Scott, thanks a lot. It was a great question. And it was such a great question that I had to bring on Andy because he's more of an expert than I am. And Andy, I just want to thank you for coming on today. It was really cool to have you on and share some of the insight that you have when it comes to solar.
Yep. Thanks, Murph.